Okay. Good evening, everyone. Woo, we're having a lot of fun this evening. I'm so excited. Okay. So good evening. Thank you all so much for joining us, for coming to tonight's special event. My name is Elise Gerstenecker. I am the Director of Curatorial Affairs and Curator of Decorative Arts at Telfair Museums. And it has been my immense pleasure to help bring the art of the character, highlights from the Glenn Close costume collection, to fruition here at the Jepson Center with a great team of our incredibly talented staff of designers and registrars. I must thank William and Judy Clement and Carrie Clement Daughtry, Bob Faircloth, the Little John Family Foundation, Linda McWhorter, Inga Brassler, Richard Kessler, Elizabeth F. Stribling, and a donor who wishes to remain anonymous for making this all possible. This exhibition sheds light on many collaborations that are involved in creating a character. The costume designer in realizing a director's vision and helping an actor embody a role, and the many makers who pour their creativity and skills into bringing these unique works to life. Tonight, we'll learn more about that process and Glenn Close's particular interest in the art of costume design. Leading our conversation is David Zyla, an Emmy Award-winning stylist and best-selling author who has collaborated with the likes of Neil Patrick Harris, Hillary Clinton, Tom Hanks, and many more. David started his own 7th Avenue evening wear label at the age of 22. And by 2001, having earned a reputation for his good taste and strong ties to the global fashion community, was recruited by ABC to reinvigorate the visual quality of its daytime programming. He has held the position of head costume designer for numerous television shows, including All My Children and General Hospital for ABC, Devious Maids for Lifetime, and The Young and the Restless for CBS. David has also designed for theater, film, and commercials, and his commentary and fashion advice has been sought by outlets from CBS News to The View, so there's no pressure on all y'all for what you're wearing tonight. He revealed his styling secrets in 2010 with the best-selling book Color Your Style, followed in 2015 with How to Win at Shopping. So please help me welcome David Zyla to introduce our speaker.
Welcome, everyone. So I'm especially excited about tonight because I'm finally meeting someone whose work I have admired for a very long time. And let me tell you a little bit about her. So Tracy Christensen, her Broadway credits include Sunset Boulevard, starring who? Thank you. We know why we're here, good. Also Souvenir, starring Judy Kay. Off-Broadway, her work has been featured in The Devil's Disciple on Theatre Row, Kate Hamill's Pride and Prejudice at the Cherry Lane Theatre, Scotland PA at the Roundabout, the Jonathan Larson Project at the Orpheum, and Love Life at Encores. Additional stage credits include High Society at the Algonquin Playhouse, Octet at the Hudson Valley Shakespeare, Beaches the Musical at Theatre Calgary, for which she received a Broadway World Calgary Award, Carousel for the English National Opera, the 25th Anniversary Reunion Concert of Ragtime, Sweeney Todd starring Emma Thompson, Candide at Carnegie Hall with John Lithgow, Love's Labour's Lost at the Folger, for which she received a Helen Hayes nomination, plus many more. And her films include Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill with Audra McDonald. She's done 10 seasons at the Chautauqua Theater Company, and she's currently a faculty member at Purchase College SUNY and Southern Methodist University. Please welcome Tracy Christensen. All right, so I want to start by asking Tracy a little bit about the process of designing for theater, and then we're going to go specifically into her collaboration on Sunset Boulevard. So firstly, Tracy, what was the moment that you knew that you were a costume designer?
Well, I knew I wasn't an actor. That was clear. But I felt a very strong pull towards the theater when I was participating in things in high school and stuff like that. And although I didn't know where I fit in, I knew it was somewhere in that domain. So I got some really great advice about going to Northwestern for my undergraduate degree, and by the time I got to my sophomore year, I had found my way to the costume shop, and everything just kind of like clunked into place, and it felt right, you know? It just felt like me. So it just took a year of kind of doing what was asked and trying out different crews and things, and then I found costumes to be the thing that made the most sense to me.
And what was your first professional design job?
I think it might have been the Wagon Wheel Playhouse in Warsaw, Indiana.
Do we want a round of applause for that? Yeah.
It was after I think it was after my sophomore year, my junior year of college, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I was the only person doing costumes, which is hilarious now. And I think I did something like 6 shows by myself in this barn in Indiana.
Meaning by yourself, like making the costumes, everything?
Making them, finding them, I don't know. You know, I have this memory, we were doing Annie, and the little orphans needed like crummy looking nightgowns, so I took all these men's t-shirts and I like put them out on the gravel, and then I just drove over them with my car a bunch of times. I didn't know what I was doing, but they looked really bad, so it worked.
So, okay, so could you not walk us through that process again, but it's really good. Would you walk us through the process of creating costumes for a play or musical? So you get a call or an email from a director or a producer, and
they ask me if I want to do the project and if the dates align with my schedule, and so let's just say that they do. And then, you know, I certainly read the script, the libretto, whatever the material is, so that I'm familiar. And I do a little bit of research to just become familiar with who created this, why, when. Is it a new piece? Is it something that's had a life? Just so that I have some familiarity. And then I have a conversation with the director. It all starts there. And hearing what that person has to say about the point of view that they want to take and what they're trying to say with the piece, so that I can go away and do intelligent research and not just be all over the map. Like you mentioned the Sweeney Todd with Emma Thompson. That was done as a concert at Lincoln Center. And it was Bryn Terfel, if any of you are opera people, who's a Welsh singer playing Sweeney, and Emma Thompson playing Mrs. Lovett. And Lonnie Price, the director, wanted to treat it almost like an Occupy Wall Street situation, like the 1% and the 99%, you know, still at play in Victorian England or today. And so we took this extremely specific point of view of how we were going to present this material that everyone knows, but with another lens to say, look at it like this, and have it be relatable to you in your life. So you start there, then I'd go away and I do a bunch of research, meet again, they point at things that they like, and then it kind of gets more and more specific, and then ultimately I start doing drawings or whatever I'm doing to get the ideas across. Sometimes it's collages. When I do modern shows, I don't really feel like it's a great use of my time to sit around and draw some guy in jeans and a t-shirt, you know? So I usually try to do more of like collage work for those types of shows. And then I also develop a color palette. By this time there's a set, or the New York Philharmonic sitting there. Whatever is going to be behind the people, and then I start developing my color work, and so then it's figuring out how are these costumes coming into being. Is this purchased? Is it rented? Is it built? Is it a combination of many things? So it's a bit of a journey, and depending on the show itself and how long it's going to run and what has to happen in it, it comes together in different ways.
Is the process different on an original show versus a revival or something that is in our culture already?
Well, it's only different in that with a new piece, you're just inventing it. It's actually my favorite thing to do. I love working on new pieces because you're the first people taking a crack at this material. So if it's something that already exists, if you're doing a revival, of course, people have an expectation of what that material is. People came to see Sweeney Todd already knowing the music. I can't imagine there was anyone in that audience who was just like, what is this? Where am I? You know, it's known material, but they got the shock of their lives in the first 2 minutes of the show with the way that we were doing it. So it differs in that way because when it's a known piece, you're figuring out why are you doing it and what do you have to say. A new piece is being completely invented as you go along.
Wonderful. Can you now take us through the process of designing the 2016 English National Opera production of Sunset Boulevard that transferred to Broadway in 2017, starring the one and only, thank you.
I guess you guys always have to say that in unison. Well, I've done a lot of work with Lonnie Price, who I mentioned earlier. He's a director. Started out as an actor. You probably saw him in lots of movies and things when he was a younger man. But we are great collaborators and had done the Sweeney Todd the year before. We did it first in New York, and then it moved to the English National Opera. So we did it there as well. So the next year, he called and said, we're going to do Sunset Boulevard with Glenn, reprising her role. Do you want to do it? And so I was like, ha. And so then the original brief to me at that moment was, she has saved all these costumes, all of her career. We want to use her costumes from the original production, which is like problematic on a lot of levels, or challenging, I should say. So, you know, number one, that was 27 years ago. And I didn't know at this time what an amazing archivist Glenn Close was. So I kind of pictured these clothes like on a hanger in some like manky
looking like the Annie dresses.
Looking like the Annie t-shirts from Wagon Wheel. And also, you know, Glenn was many years older than, you know, you've seen how big she was in that exhibit, right? She was like this, just this little teeny tiny thing. And when I was working with her, she was still very fit, but not that tiny at all. So there's that. And also those were designed for another production. So it was a real challenge for me to think about using some of those things, making them work, and designing a whole production around these existing things. And I felt like she was kind of reluctant as well. You know, we were both kind of like, okay. You know, it wasn't the most fun idea, because she came at me like, what are we gonna do? You know, like rubbing her hands together. And I was like, use your costumes from before. And so we went into the British production at English National Opera with me figuring out how to make things fit and just kind of picking and choosing and doing things. And the whole time we were there, she was, you know, minging around saying, it just doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right, I don't feel like I should, and this is wrong. And I was like helpless. You know, I'm just standing backstage at some British theater going, I know, you know, I don't know what to do to help you, because this was the brief. And so when we finished, I mean, I can't even tell you how that was received there. You know, British audiences are like, oh, that was wonderful, you know. And the curtain came down, that first preview, and I'm not joking, you would have thought we were at a like Rolling Stones concert. I mean, I felt my hair kind of like fling forward because people were just screaming in admiration of that performance. It was incredible. So we got through all that, and it was all fine and great, well received, wonderful. And then I came back to New York, and not that long after, I got this call that we were going to move it to Broadway. And like 3 seconds later, Glenn was calling me saying, we need more costumes. I need you to design for this. And so we sat down and just started figuring out what could we still use from Anthony Powell's original set that made some sense for this, and what did I need to design to bring this into her performance. I mean, she was doing a completely different performance than she had done all those years ago. And so we worked really hard together to try to figure out what was needed and what we could do to, build out this wardrobe. And also, what we had learned in England was that at 70, and I say this with, she's got more energy than every one of us put together, but she could not run around backstage the way the show requires. And she spends half her time making her way up to the top of that staircase and making these big entrances and, on these big shoes and everything. And so she said, I need you to simplify and streamline these clothes. And so I had to come to Jesus about what do we really need and how can I make a thing that goes under here and then also can go under here so Glenn's not taking her pants off every 2 seconds and then having to run, to get up the stairs and whatever. So it was kind of a double request of can we streamline this so it's easier without compromising the integrity of this storytelling, and also can I get a bunch of new costumes that are not from this old production that don't make sense to me anymore as Norma Desmond. So, I mean, I don't know how this works. I'm just gonna push on something. Okay, that didn't work. So I provided her with a bunch of research. She was mostly interested in what she called at-home looks. What does Norma Desmond wear when she's just sitting around, eating s'mores, And so I did all this research about clothing that could fit this bill, loungewear and that kind of thing. And then I did a series of little croquis drawings for her describing how this would work. And this was also incorporating pants and things that she already had that we would have in the lineup of the wardrobe. And so she looked at all of these, and she chose the ones that she liked the best. And then, oh, hello, you're out of order. One of them was this red thing right here. She really gravitated to that. And this, you can see this sort of, 1940s tunic-y top thing kind of married to that was interesting to her. Because the whole conceit of the original production is that this woman is trapped in the past. She was a pioneer of silent films, and now it's all moved on, and she's just left in the dust and doesn't get it. She's angry and hurt and all these things, and it drives her mad. So the clothes were really, really hearkening, way back into the silent film era, and I needed to bring her up into the 40s at least. So then this was one of the designs that we came up with over here on the left, and this was me sending her some photos of this Chinese brocade and some fabrics that would be trimming it. I was just sort of, pinning it on a mannequin to say, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? She sent me this back. I was like, what do you think about this? And so we took this into the fitting room in a mock-up form, which means not in the real fabric, just in practice fabric. And one of our big things was the neckline, and we both decided that neither of us had a good idea, and then we came onto this more of a little cowl kind of thing that ended up being really flattering for her. So this was the sketch then that I did to bring all of this stuff together, and those were the fabrics that we used. And there was also, the need for jewelry, because Norma Desmond has to have the best jewelry of ever. So I was working with some jewelry makers to get more stuff put together for that. And then this was one of the other costumes that, obviously this is not a costume yet, but it was me showing her, like, this is how this fabric will look, and that over there was some trim ideas and stuff. Okay, we saw that already. Okay, so then this was, these two things were the other ideas that she wanted. We ended up making that one over on the far right out of a leopard, which was really interesting. And this was that thing that you just saw on the dress form. So this was one of her original Anthony Powell over costumes, and I suggested that we make a jumpsuit that could live under that thing and also live under that thing and live under that thing, you know, and we could just kind of make it be this neutral base that all these extravagant things could go on top of, and hopefully the audience wouldn't be wondering, like, why does this woman never change her jumpsuit, you know? And this was the finished garment. It was just spectacular. It was so perfectly suited for her figure, for the moment in the show, which is when Norma decides that Joe Gillis should have a whole new wardrobe, and all these tailors come in and start measuring him, and she's, you know, kind of bossing everyone around. And it was just a big, beautiful, bold color, and it was super cool. This was some of the jewelry that we had for her. It was definitely a go big or go home kind of jewelry situation. There was nothing demure at all about any of the earrings and necklaces and stuff. So I wanted to show you some of the different things that we used, some of which was original to her. I don't know that any of these were original. I think this was all stuff that I figured out in the UK when we did that production. And there she is wearing it and being smiley. Yeah. So that was the journey, and she was, I think, just really excited, as was I, to collaborate on some new, fresh things. She's a remarkably collaborative performer. And as you obviously are figuring out, she loves costumes, and she loves to be informed by costumes. So it's really a big part of her process. It's not just, well, I'm figuring out my character, and I'll just put something on me and whatever. It's a whole journey together, and that was what was exciting for me as a designer, to be in the room with someone who's so respectful of the design process that we could work together, and I didn't have to feel intimidated or, you know, scared, or that she was apathetic and just didn't care and just give me something, you know, that kind of thing. It was really great, really, really great.
What a wonderful journey, you know, and also for her to step back into something and have that revelation of, you know, I'm playing the part differently 20-something years later, and I'm not moving the same way, and the blocking is different. It's a different director, so, you know, the design choice is being a little bit different. What a great for her to realize that, but then for you to be able to, how do you say, go through the different steps of that. And it sounds like the first step was absolutely terrible for you, like, you know, but then what it became. So it's always good when it ends well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Instead of the other way around.
Yeah, she said to me at one point, you're so graceful in how you've handled how this was presented to you, which I appreciated so much, because I was honored just to get to do it, but it was really challenging. There were a lot of that, and I also had to meet with Anthony Powell. Like, can't believe I said that. Like, the most legendary British costume designer ever, worked with Glenn 1 million times, and talked to him about using his stuff. You don't just do that. And he was just delighted and delightful, and told me 1 million stories about things. And I had asked him about their collaboration on the Dalmatians films, which came after Sunset Boulevard, and he had been hired for the position. I think she had put him forward after working on Sunset Boulevard. And so he came to her and said, okay, you know, Cruella de Vil, like, what would you like her to be? And she said, well, you will design the costumes and I will act into them. No pressure, Anthony. Just come up with that.
Tracy, what is your favorite part about designing a play?
It's so hard because every part is my favorite on some days. Like one of my favorite days is the first dress rehearsal, but it's also terrifying because what if everyone discovers that I don't know what I'm doing on that day? And I'm also, if someone else says my name, I'm going to scream and run from the building. Like it's overwhelming. But I think what I've always loved about live performance, because this is not a money-making career. Live performance is really the sort of, the poor relative in the scheme of entertainment. But it's the live audience and live performance, the organicness of all of that means something to me that's really different than I have ever felt working on something that was captured on film. So I think my favorite part in general of doing this work is there are humans there and there's humans here, and we're all sharing this experience together in a way that will never be repeated because we're all going to be different tomorrow. So I think in general, that's my favorite thing about it.
And what would be your least favorite part?
People who do mysterious things that create a bunch of problems for me. Like one time I was working as an associate, actually. I was not the designer of this Broadway musical, but there was an actress in the leading role, and she had to carry the show pretty much on her back. It was very much about her. And we had made all these beautiful costumes for her, and we were in previews, and everything was going fine. And one of the producers inexplicably had a little meeting with her and told her that she looked big. Like, dude, what was your expected outcome of this thing? I hope it was that you wanted to spend like a whole boatload of money, because she's never getting in those clothes again. And that's what we did.
Did she even go on that night?
She went on, but of course she was really upset and angry and distrustful of us, because how could we let her go on stage looking fat, which she wasn't and didn't. But, there's stuff like that happens where you just think, seriously, what were you expecting to happen right now? And now I have this huge mess to clean up and a person that's in distress for no reason. So I don't like that.
Okay. What has been the most surprising discovery along your career path?
That's a hard one, because there's lots of surprises. Like, I'm surprised that I can do it and people want me to do it, and I so far have been okay at doing it. But I'm also just continuously impressed with the people in the room. You come into a space and everyone's there for the same purpose. And although sometimes, it's rocky or whatever's happening, but for the most part, I'm constantly amazed that there's so many of us that will do this unreasonable thing with our lives, because it's wildly unreasonable on a million levels. And I now have been teaching for a long time, too. I've been teaching at one of the state schools in New York in Purchase, and I say this to my students all the time, like, this is a really unreasonable thing that you're doing. And they're like, uh-huh. Because it's who you are. It's not your job. It's who you are when you work as an artist for your life. You don't, go to a job and, like, screw the caps on the toothpaste tubes all day and then go home and be this other thing. You're this thing 24/7. So it's an exhausting way to live, but it's exhilarating and thrilling too. So I guess it's been a surprise to me that there's so many people who are willing to live this life, because it's nuts, but it's really fun. And I wouldn't trade anything that I've done my whole career.
How do you stay focused?
That is a really good question, because right now I'm in the middle of working on about 6 different productions at various phases of, where it's at. And it's all about compartmentalizing and managing your time. So I'm going to say when I go home tonight, I'm spending 3 hours working on this show, even though it's not the biggest fire in front of my face, but these people need this so that they can move on and do their process. So I'm going to put all this other stuff out of my brain, and I'm just doing this. And then I'll think about that other thing later. And so it's a real game, because unlike other people in the business in different roles, I don't get to just work on one thing at a time. If I'm going to make a living, I have to work on many, many things at a time. So it really requires a special kind of focus and a special kind of time management.
Do you ever, is there ever that moment where you have an idea and you feel it's very close to what it needs to be? And I guess my question is, how, you're close, but it's not quite there yet. Do you have a trick to get you there, or a technique to say, okay, do you let that go for a while? Like you wait to design the Act 2 dress later, or do you power through?
I usually kind of let it go a little bit, maybe work on something else where I have more confidence. Or I might talk to the director and say, what's missing here? Sometimes looking at it that way, like what's missing, as opposed to what's wrong with this. It's not that it's wrong, it's just not quite perfect. So yeah, if I dwell too hard on one thing or try to fix something, and sometimes it's circling back around to your original idea. I mean, that has happened to me many times, where things have evolved and grown and changed and gone this direction, that direction, then you get here and everybody's kind of like, meh, and then you go like, hey, what about this from day one? And ta-da, it's an amazing, it's like the best idea anyone ever had. So sometimes you have to just go on this weird journey, and it's not going to ever quite make it, and you have to circle back around.
To be a good designer, you sort of have to, whatever project you're working on, you have to really dive into the deep end of that era, et cetera. But do you have a particular era that is your favorite?
Oh, there's a lot of eras that I really love, but lately I've been getting a lot of shows in the 1950s. So I just did High Society, White Christmas, and some other thing that was in the 50s. Like, it's all a big blur. So I've gotten to be kind of extra specially familiar with a lot of the stuff from the early 50s, and it's been a really fun. It's a very generous and flattering time for a lot of people. Like, whatever you got going on below the waist, gals, doesn't matter. You can have the biggest butt in the world and it doesn't matter. But yeah, I don't know, but then there's something like extraordinary about the 30s, and there's something extraordinary about the turn of the 20th century, and just the way the body, male and female, can be manipulated with proportion and shape and size and all the things is fascinating to me.
Do you have a favorite garment? So if Tracy is stranded on a desert island, or Tybee, and she can only take one garment, what might that be?
I mean, for me?
For you.
Oh, man. I don't know. Something loose. Soft. I don't know. I don't have, for myself, I'm not a clothes horse for myself at all. My primary focus has always been comfort, so I can just do my job without feeling like my waist hurts or my feet hurt, no. So I'm kind of a baby when it comes to that sort of thing.
So maybe a caftan or something.
I would say a big muumuu.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, muumuu. That's good. I think the audience probably has a lot of questions for you. Why don't we open it up? Does anyone have a question for Tracy? Yes, in the black.
It was kind of sort of answered, but how has your career affected your personal style outside of work, when you're not working and you're just going to be like doing your daily activities or going to like a nice event, and or if it's affected how you look at clothing and purchase it?
I don't know if it's affected my personal style, because I'm a girl from a farm in the Midwest. It's like a miracle I own these clothes. But what I've come to realize, going back to the, when you're an artist, it's your 24/7 responsibility, is that I've become extremely present to being inspired by what you're wearing versus what you're wearing versus what you're, and the idea that people dress for what they want, and really just getting present to that. Like, I can entertain myself forever in an airport watching everybody going by and thinking, okay, so you approved that on yourself this morning, right? First. Second, what is it that you want when you're wearing that? In a positive and negative way, like, it's fascinating. So I think my career has really heightened my presence to how other people present themselves, because I was saying earlier that this is an extremely psychological job. I've learned over the years of trying to teach people what I do that it's almost unteachable, because until you're in the room with GC, you're not doing anything, right? Like, you can design whatever you want until Glenn Close walks in the room, or Patti LuPone, or whoever you're dealing with, or just Joe Blow. They come with stuff, baggage, history, pain, insecurity, body problems, all sorts of things. And then on top of that is a psychological component of the character that they're playing. And then you have the psychology of the audience. Who is your audience? So it's all like super heady, and it's hard to teach that. But I think over the years of my career, I've learned to be super present to the humanity of people and clothing.
Thank you. Do I see another hand? Yes, the gentleman? Yeah.
Yes, you provided a perfect segue to my question. Many actors have a very definite idea of their persona and how they should appear. What if that persona and how they should appear conflicts with the character they're playing? How, as the costumer, do you negotiate and handle that crisis?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends on who the person is. Like, I remember one time I saw this Broadway show, and there were a ton of people in it. It was set in the 60s. It's called The Best Man. And this door opened, and this woman was standing there, and I thought, oh my gosh, who is that? And she opened her mouth, and it was Candice Bergen. I wouldn't have recognized her at all. But she was wearing this outfit, and I was like, okay, because who designed it was Anne Roth, whose stuff is in that other room. And then she came back in the second act, and she was wearing another version of that outfit in a different color. And I'm like, okay, I see what's going on here, is that Anne Roth had to do just what you're saying. She had to somehow take whatever it was that Candice Bergen had going on and try to filter it through the lens of the 60s, and it turned into 3 or 4 versions of the same thing in different colors. And the general audience probably wouldn't notice something like that, but my radar was immediately on it, like, there's no way Anne Roth would do that otherwise. So, it depends when you're dealing with stars and people who the public know. So, for example, I was the associate on Beauty and the Beast on Broadway for many years, and we had different celebrities going in and out of the show in different roles. And at one point, we had the singer Toni Braxton, who's this super famous R&B singer and a woman of color, and she was our first belle of color. And I think she was maybe our first celebrity belle, too, I'm not sure. But the designer came back and redesigned all kinds of things for Toni, not only to make the hair correct for her and the colors correct for her skin tone and stuff, but people have an expectation of Toni Braxton. And even though she's playing Belle in this completely fictitious fairy tale story, there had to be a marriage of Toni Braxton image and this character. So it kind of depends on the person and who they are for the audience. If it's just a run-of-the-mill, I hate to say it that way, but just like a rank and file actor, and there's something about the costume that's really going against the grain of what they think looks good on them. It's a tricky thing because this isn't about you. This is about your character. So it's not, my goal is not necessarily to make you look amazing if your character doesn't subscribe to that. So it can get dodgy. And again, it's all the psychology and making people understand that they can trust you. You're not just blowing them off and sticking them out there in any stupid thing that's the path of least resistance. That there's actually a huge amount of intention in making you look the correct way as opposed to looking what you think is beautiful on you. I hope that makes sense.
Great question. Yes.
I've heard stories about divas taking scissors to costumes and operas and things like that. Do you have any really horrible stories?
Oh, I have no problem dropping names whatsoever. If you're gonna act like a brat, I'm gonna say it. I've never had anyone destroy anything, but the first time I worked with Patti LuPone was for a big concert of Candide at Lincoln Center. You might have seen it. It's on Great Performances sometimes. It was her and Kristen Chenoweth and a bunch of other celebrities. And she was playing the old woman, and I had this incredible costume made for her at Barbara Matera Limited, who made a huge amount of the stuff that's in the other room. And it involved this jacket, this velvet jacket. And so we're at the day of, I think it was, we had like a dress rehearsal and then we just were doing it. And Patti was like, what did they line this with? And I said, I don't know, Patti, like fabric. And she's like, well, it doesn't breathe, I can't wear it, I can't do the show in this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do? So I called the woman that made it. I'm like, what do I do? She goes, cut it out. Just get a scissors and cut the lining out. What are we supposed to do, So I went and got those huge scissors and I went to Patti's dressing room and I'm like, where's the coat? And she goes, oh, what are you gonna do? And I said, I'm gonna cut the lining out. If you can't act in this coat because of the lining, it's gotta go. And she's like, well, couldn't I just use pit pads? So what was this whole thing that we just did? Where I ran around like freaking out and we did all this. And then I realized every show I did with her, she had this big spaz out moment right before we, if it wasn't about the lining, it was her shoes and it's this and that. And she had to kind of create this stir and then be like, oh, you know what, it's fine. So, it's kind of part of their process, but I've never even witnessed anyone destroying a costume, thank God. Because that would be really shameful on their part, unforgivable.
Yes.
I was curious if it's common in the industry for actors to keep their costumes, or if not, where do they all go?
It is not common. And I don't know, Glenn being Glenn, I think just wrote it into her contracts that that's what was happening. But generally, they belong to the producer. So the design belongs to me, but the piece of clothing belongs to the person that paid for it. So that it might be kept together as a show, which Sunset Boulevard is, and given or sold to a place like Goodspeed Opera House up in Connecticut, where it's then rented out. Or it could get scattered to various other sources, or it could be destroyed. I mean, it just depends on how much the producers want to deal with it. At the end of Sunset Boulevard, because we did a very limited run on that revival, it was extended and stuff, but it was never just open-ended, running forever kind of thing. And they allowed me to take a lot of the stuff that we had purchased. I had bought a lot of vintage ties and things like that, and they offered I could donate them wherever I wanted to. And so I donated them to Chautauqua because I had been designing up there for years and years, and the budgets were super low, and I thought, man, if they just had all these ties and suspenders and all this stuff, it would be really a big deal to them. So I got to donate all kinds of cool stuff to these little dinky theaters that I have done work for and boost their stock. So I really, really appreciated that.
Good question. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what the collaboration process is like with the costume technology specialists at a place like Matera's
Yeah.
when they're translating your design?
Absolutely. I want to point out that Matera's made Glenn's original costumes. By the time we did Sunset Boulevard in 2017, Barbara Matera had passed, and that shop had ceased to exist. But there was a woman that used to work with Barbara who had worked on the costumes originally for Sunset Boulevard, who now has her own shop. Her name is Kathy Marshall, and she has this shop called Tricorn. And I said, I'm going there. You know, I want to be where Glenn has, there's some familiarity with Glenn. She'll remember Kathy. And so, I lean very heavily on these people. I was raised by designers who lived by the mantra of, you know, when there's true collaboration, everyone's a genius kind of thing. And these are people who are really going to bring stuff to life. So if you have the opportunity to look in the exhibit again, I think there's one or two sketches of Anthony Powell, who just drew like broccoli, and then Matera's made that stuff out of it. I mean, like these people doing this beading and you know, all of the detail stuff is just phenomenal. So when you get to interface with people like that on that level, you really want to lean into their guidance around fabrics and ideas for trims and all of that kind of stuff. But you work very closely with them, and then there's a variety of people who are making the things. And so when you have a fitting, those people come in and interface with you and the actor, and you all kind of brainstorm together to come to the finished idea. But yeah, to be all fancy and precious about your idea with the people who are trained to make things beautifully is really counter to how I was raised in this business. They know a lot more about any of that than I would ever claim. Nobody wants a costume that I made, ever.
Well, if you have a car and a T-shirt, you know.
Unless you want a crapped up T-shirt. I can do that really well.
Would you just go over the various roles in a costume shop?
Yeah. Okay, so there's usually a matriarch or a patriarch who owns it, and it's kind of their vision. So with Barbara Matera, she and her husband owned the shop, and he was the business guy, and she was the creative genius. And Kathy, started her shop, and she's the nucleus of everything that happens there. And then there are people called drapers who take your sketch, like I brought some of my sketches, so let's just say this was a Joe Gillis look. They take this and have a conversation with you, and you show them research and all kinds of things, and they start making it out of muslin or something that's appropriate. And they're the ones that come into the fitting and work with you on the fit, because no matter how well you draw and whatever you think you're doing, until you're in the room with the human body, you just don't know what is going to be best. So it takes an extensive fitting process to get it to be absolutely right. And for some people, it's like, I have to do this. And some people, they're just standing there, but they don't want anything touching their neck. I just had one of those where it's like, I don't want anything within a 4-inch radius of my neck. So there's that, and then there are these incredibly gifted people who sew and do the beading and do the finishing work and the hand sewing, and just it's exquisite. And I was saying earlier to someone that one of the things I learned when I was in and out of Barbara Matera's shop is how beautifully made the things were on the inside. And I remember saying to Barbara once, why do you spend so much time on the inside of Belle's costume, And she said, because the actress will see it. It's the first thing she's going to see when she steps into the dress, like I was really dumb for not knowing that. But it's now offensive to me when I see something made and it's on the outside it looks great, and on the inside it's a train wreck. It really bugs me because I feel like that was real artistry. That was caring on a level that, I was so privileged to be a part of and witness and learn.
Any other questions? Yes.
Did you ever work with anyone that you would never work with again?
You guys, all you want is dirt. That's what this group is. I could say there's probably maybe less than 5 actors that I would prefer to never be in a room with again because they were so rude and disrespectful. One of them's dead, so I can say her name. It was Elaine Stritch. Yeah, she was a talented woman, but a real kind of pig backstage. She was disrespectful, and I don't go for that. But yeah, there were a couple designers that I worked for as an assistant or an associate who made the process ridiculously challenging. One designer in particular, he's also no longer living, so I don't feel like I'm besmirching anything, but he operated from this place of everyone's against me. I'm alone, and everyone is against me. And I just wanted to say, dude, do you have any fun doing this? Because you're definitely sucking the fun out of it for everyone in the shop, on your team. We're here for you. So those are the kinds of experiences that I look back on and just think, this was so not fun. And it's usually because somebody was choosing to make it not fun and being a bully or being a brat. But it's not been very often. I've been really, really lucky.
Great. Other questions? Yes.
Up in the back.
And then we'll go to the back. Yes. Yes.
Thanks.
My question is, have you seen your industry affected by the lack or less of the vintage shops? I remember back in Manhattan in the 90s, the prime of all the stores, and I wonder if you see.
Oh yeah, huge. My assistants are just like, ugh, because I'm always like, there used to be this store where you'd go, because there truly was a lot of hole-in-the-wall stores when I first came into the business. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah.
Where it was filthy and disgusting and horrible, and they had everything. And it was run by some, crazy guy with big suspenders or something, and it was totally weird, and they had a weird basement, but it was just packed full of really cool stuff. And the industry the real estate situation has driven so many of these wonderful little places away because no one can afford the real estate. So yeah, I've seen a tremendous decline. Even in stores like Woolworths. I could do a whole show out of Woolworths if I had to, they just folded up and went away, and it's really, it bums me out. But then I think, when I first came out, designers were whining about this or that shop that didn't exist anymore, and I was like, blah, blah, blah. And so I think you just come out into the world and you do your thing, and you embrace what there is and you make it work. But I do mourn the loss of the little place, the little hole-in-the-wall place. They are just gone.
Because they themselves were immersive theater.
Oh my
It was like, and the possibility was all around you. And the
Yeah.
characters were extraordinary.
Yeah.
There was a hand
The
in
lady
the
in the
center
middle,
back.
yeah.
Yes.
Have you designed very often for non-human characters? And if so, what is that like?
Do you mean like people playing non-human characters?
Like the Wiz or
Yeah.
or Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, definitely. And when I was an associate, which is the sort of highest level of assistant work that you can do, where you're really managing the project from the creative end to the budget to the schedule to, you're the manager of the whole thing. I did Beauty and the Beast was like the first big one that I worked on where people were teapots and stuff. But then I kind of got known as someone who could handle those types of shows because this isn't just here's your pants. This is, here's this big structure that you need to wear, and it needs to be safe, and you need to be able to move in it, and you know, we need to have 42 fittings to get it to fit right, and so then I was working on things like Dance of the Vampires and Shrek the Musical, and you know, I felt like, could I just work on some show where people are wearing, you know, clothes instead of structures and tentacles and vampire teeth and, you know. But I have to say, it does prepare you for just about anything, you know. I mean, all those shows prepared me for really, like I did a show at SeaWorld, I was saying to someone earlier, I did a show at SeaWorld where I clothed like the trainers and the people who were doing the high diving and all the stuff like that. And the producers came to me at one point and they were like, oh, you know, we think we need to have someone fly. And I was like, okay, what kind of harness is it? You know, I made like 100 people fly in my career so far. Whatever, bring it on, you know. And and they were kind of like, oh, okay. You know, they thought it was going to be this big crisis. And I was just like, hey, if they have to hang upside down, if they have to do I've done all that. So it was kind of a cool thing that I did all of those shows where there was so much non-traditional clothing that prepared me for all sorts of scenarios. Yeah.
Excellent. We'll take one more up here.
Yeah.
So I actually have a question for you, David. As a lifelong Young and the Restless fan, can you give me your best soap opera fashion moment?
Oh, well, today's about Tracy, but Erica Kane's 10th wedding. On All My Children. I know it's not Y&R, but I would say, how many times can you say that, right? 10th wedding, and I did put her in white. Because the character would have worn white, which is, you know, character. Young and the Restless, I would say, we got to do a lot of weddings on that show too. So I think I dressed Abby for 3 of them. There's a character named Abby, and she gets bored easily, obviously, and moves on. But I would say the weddings were the most fun, because also you get the whole cast, and you know, in daytime TV, so much of it is like 2-person scenes, and so to get the whole group in, it's really great. One more for, yes?
My question is, if a play is a flop, do you feel tainted in some way by the fact that the actor, the director, and the producer failed? Do you think it rubs off on the costumes as well?
Not necessarily. I don't think any show has ever failed because the costumes were sucky. You know, I don't think that's not a thing. And I've been part of some pretty big you-know-whats, you know, that were just not good. Dance of the Vampires. But the thing that actually made me the most upset was a project I did coming out of the pandemic, and it was a musical I had done the workshop of before the pandemic, and now this was a bigger production. And the director and the choreographer and the writers all had very different points of view about the clothes. And I was just in the middle of this horrible triptych of people who were not agreeing. And I just did something that I thought was going to appease the majority, and it was pretty messy. You know, it just really didn't have a strong vision because there wasn't a strong vision. And I felt gross and like a failure. And then later, I was excused from the project. And you know, I don't know if they think that the problems with that show rest on the costumes, because I'm here to say that it doesn't. But it made me feel really lousy because I felt like I had failed as a collaborator when I was actually in a really impossible position. And it's never fun to be excused from something. I've been excused a couple times from things for various reasons. Sometimes you're just not the right person and whatever. But yeah, that made me feel the worst, I think, rather than just being part of something that's not successful. because there's so many reasons why a show doesn't succeed. And it's usually not because of the visuals. It's usually the material itself is not appropriate or not whatever. So interestingly, I'm working on a concert that goes up this weekend of Sweet Smell of Success, which was a Broadway show from some years ago with a star-studded cast and that's based on the film, and it was a pretty big failure. And we're revisiting it as a 3-performance concert with obviously a totally different cast, but we're in such a different political climate now that the story about this bully with all of this power, just smushing people that he doesn't like is like, wait, it has a different kind of resonance. Yeah. So it's interesting, like something that was not successful in its time, for maybe the material was too dark or it was just something was just not right about it. I think now people will be viewing it as in a very different kind of way. So we'll hope that this show that's always kind of had like a thing stuck on it will get a little bit of a reprieve.
Excellent. We have time let's do one more. I saw a hand over here. Yes.
That is such a great question. I was saying earlier to Leslie that, when I first came out of school, I just wanted people to hire me. I didn't care what it was. I just wanted jobs. I just wanted to start, and it felt super arbitrary to me. I just worked for them, and then I worked for them, and I just didn't feel like I had control over it. When I look back on it now, I can see that I was driving the car, and that I was even subconsciously recognizing. So I'll tell you one quick story, because I know we're probably needing to end. But when I got to grad school at Rutgers, which is in New Jersey, there was a woman working there in the shop who was friends with someone who was the associate costume designer on the original production of Into the Woods. And he called Lynn and said, "Do you have a couple of, dimwits that can come and do the stitching that we forgot to put in the bid? We need." And so my friend and I, we went to Barbara Matera, and we sat in the back and stitched this latex mud onto the bottom of these costumes. And I not only got to meet the designer, Ann Hould-Ward, who became my primary mentor eventually and later, but I met Barbara, I met the 2 associates, I met all these people, and so I finished that job and then finished my education, and then I went and contacted Anne again and said, you probably don't remember me. I was a mud stitcher from 3 years ago. And then she just started hiring me, and the next thing I knew, I was doing Beauty and the Beast. And it's like crazy how things unfold that way when you work this way. So even though I at the time felt like I was just careening around, taking any old job and whatever, I was actually really choosing to lean into people who I thought had the kind of thing to teach me that I wanted to learn. And people who were exceptional business people, because I was saying to Leslie earlier, this is a business. It's not just, draw this and it magically appears. It's a lot of business and navigation and money and getting what you need and all that stuff. And someone like her, who I just met by happenstance, taught me everything I know about navigating those kind of waters. So that the set designer from Beauty and the Beast is the person who got me on the SeaWorld show all those years later. So yeah, it is crazy how people come back around. And now I'm seeing people that I had in my class 15 years ago are like producers and stuff. I'm like, it's amazing. That's why you never want to burn a bridge. Because you don't know who's going to come back and be your boss. So, yeah.
My last question is, do you have a dream project?
I kind of want to design the Radio City Christmas show. I think I'd be really good at that. It's right up my alley. Because I love doing things that have to do with music and dancing and fantasy.
Hey,
and
you're doing
stuff.
White Christmas right now. This
White
is a
Christmas,
natural
baby.
step. Yeah.
Ay. That's a big show. But yeah, I think something like that would be really fun for me. But I don't know who I have to know to get that job.
Well, they may be here tonight. You never know.
So hey, if you're out there.
Tracy Christensen, I just want to thank you on behalf of the Telfair for being part of this.
My
Keep
pleasure.
doing the beautiful work that you do.
Thank you.
And I want to thank the audience for your fabulous questions and for being here tonight. Thank you again. And if you haven't seen the exhibit again, it's going to be open for just a little while after this program. So check it out. Thank you.
Thank you.